I mentor children in schools, and there is a lot of struggles and suffering caused by the lockdowns and by the changes in their social world, and this money is just an extortionate waste. You know, young children are affected by it as much as older school children, and they should be spending the money on, you know, repairing that damage, not on a vaccine that is actually, COVID doesn't affect children to a great extent, and I'm not saying they don't get it, and I'm not saying that there are very, very few affected by it, but the majority of children are not struggling from having COVID or going to get COVID. They're struggling from lockdowns.
And speaking of that,
and the schools are underfunded as well, and they're struggling with all the measures that they've had to put in place. And the measures that they've had to put in place are very environmentally unfriendly. There's polyurethane screens gone up, everybody has to wear masks, hand sanitizer. It's all expense that schools can't afford, and that, create a lot of rubbish.
And you're talking about kids being harmed. Have you seen about the developmental delay in children? So children learning to speak at a later age, children not being able to socialise properly, a lot more children just developing the signals of autism.
It's common sense, because children learn from faces. They don't learn, and they can't. If you can't see a face, you can't learn. So their development is slowed right down, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see what they're going through. I've got a family member who works in an infant school, and she said that there's so many children this year who presented with real problems and real struggles. And the school that I work at, which is teenagers, again, they're presenting with real struggles, and they're losing their social skills. And they're losing their ability to deal with stuff because they're isolated.
And I used to work as a teaching assistant, and I sort of remember what it was like, the sort of factory farming education. Do you think that you can really maintain control over class when everyone's got these things over their faces?
In school, I think it's pointless. I really think it's pointless. You can't. You can go into a shop and it's difficult to buy stuff when everybody's wearing a mask and behind a screen. That's hard enough. And so, yeah, it's virtually impossible.
I remember in some of our training sessions, they always used to say that half of, the outcome of the child is decided before they get to 5 years old. And no matter what you do after that, that'll only affect the outcome of the child by about 50%. So they said that the early years development are the most important years. Do you think that the harm that's been done can ever truly be repaired, considering the amount of kids who have lost that development in those early years?
I hope so, but I think it will need investment, and I think spending money on vaccines for small children is a waste of money, because it doesn't affect them, and what affects them more is their long-term development. And I think that the investment should go there. It shouldn't be invested in a vaccine. We now have antiviral drugs that stop people having to be hospitalised. Why can't we go down that route instead of vaccinating everybody? We've got herd immunity now anyway. We've got most of the population who've been vaccinated. We have herd immunity. So we've got these antiviral drugs, so why can't we then invest the money that we do have available for the NHS or for schools in repairing the damage, not vaccinating an unnecessary proportion of the population?
And are you concerned about the adverse reactions that have been coming out and that doctors have been reporting on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was very sceptical of a lot in the early stages, but I do personally know people who have been affected in various ways. I don't like to talk about it because then it comes across as like you're an anti-vaxxer, and I'm not as per se, but for this particular one, I just don't find it necessary, and I think that people should be able to choose.
Well, exactly. I'd say probably the vast majority of vaccines that are developed, they go, okay, this isn't safe, but then there are only a few that make it through the 10 or 15 years of development.
This vaccine is not like any of the other vaccines because they changed the laws to rush it through, which suggests to me that it's not the same as the other vaccines because it hasn't had the testing that the other vaccines have had. So I am concerned about it. But there are lots of other issues around that, which I think we can also focus on, which is, like I said, the waste of money going on and the environmental effect. I mean, it's across the board. It's now getting to be a nonsense. You know, the last 3 pandemics of the last century were gone within 2 years. So why are we now vaccinating children? We've had this pandemic for 2 years. The virus is being largely assimilated. The cases, yes, are up, and that was to be expected. We all knew that at the beginning of the pandemic. That's what happens with these viruses, with this particular strain of virus. So that was expected. So what we should be doing now is just dealing with the aftermath. We shouldn't be vaccinating children with a vaccine that hasn't been properly tested. We should be actually repairing the damage. In the last 3 pandemics of the last century, there were no lockdowns, there were no masks, there were no hand sanitizers, there was no vaccines for 2 of them at least. All of the measures that we have in place now weren't there, and after 2 years the viruses were assimilated. So this one is now getting to that phase. We have herd immunity, we have virus assimilation. Why are we still vaccinating at this level? This is about freedom of choice for me, and this is like, but also, when I say freedom of choice, I just feel that people are being bullied constantly. Their psychology is being preyed upon. I looked at the Sage Scientists. I wanted to talk to some people in Sage Science, so I looked up Sage Scientists, and half of them are psychologists. Why are half of the Sage Scientists psychologists? And other strains of they're not all medical people. Put it that way. They are not medical people.
Well,
And I was surprised by that, and then I thought, why is that? And they're leaning on people, and they're pushing people and bullying people. There are adverts now about long COVID and all sorts of side issues, and every time you look at one thing, they will take you to another place. And it's about freedom of choice, and they're stopping our freedom of choice. They're stopping us travelling.